researchers cite a figure that there were at least 493 attacks on humans, leading to 354 fatalities between 2010 and 2014. Nile crocodiles are more dangerous to humans than the native crocodilians of Florida.
In Florida's vast wetlands, a silent invader stalks with terrifying precision. Not a python, but a far deadlier predator, capable of sprinting on land and vanishing in water. What if an animal responsible for hundreds of deaths each year in Africa has quietly claimed the Everglades? Stranger than fiction, this apex hunter lived undetected for years, displacing native wildlife and thriving in the shadows. This isn't just an invasive species story, it's a chilling reminder that Florida's swamps may be more dangerous and more unfamiliar than we ever imagined. A night encounter in Florida. On a dark March night in 2012, near Homestead, Florida, a patrol team scanned the waters of the Everglades with a halogen spotlight. The beam caught a ghostly set of eyes reflecting off the water, a sign of a nocturnal creature adapted to darkness. Normally, the color of these reflections can identify who's lurking beneath: the red gleam of an alligator or the softer yellow of an American crocodile. But this time, the distance between the eyes and the size of the skull suggested something far different and larger than any native species. Expecting to tag a large nuisance alligator, the rangers approached cautiously. What followed was bewildering and almost unbelievable. The creature did not dive or slip away into the murky depths, as any alligator or crocodile would. Instead, it launched itself onto the mud bank and sprinted forward, lifting its belly entirely off the ground and reaching speeds of about 14 kilometers per hour on land. Such speed and agility were unheard of for large reptiles in this environment. By the time the rangers scrambled ashore, the animal had melted into the sawgrass, leaving only confusion behind. The incident was filed away as a strange anomaly, likely a case of mistaken identity. For years, the truth remained hidden beneath layers of assumption and uncertainty. But 4 years later, tissue samples from that night were analyzed in a genetics lab at the University of Florida.
Visit right here. Veterinarians at the University of Florida recently checked out alligator, required medical attention. The gator got her blood drawn.
The DNA results shattered previous guesses. The animal was neither an American alligator nor an American crocodile. Its genetic signature hailed from a distant place, 7,000 miles away in the Okavango Delta of Botswana. What Florida was facing was no typical invasive species. This was something far more extraordinary and alarming, an incursion that had silently unfolded for over a decade. This encounter was not just an oddity. It signaled the beginning of a new reign in the Everglades. The swamp is no random wilderness. It is a finely balanced battlefield where millions of years of evolution have crafted a complex hierarchy. For generations, this hierarchy had been protected by two apex predators with clearly defined territories. The discovery of a creature that defied these boundaries was both remarkable and deeply unsettling. The alligator, a bulky and armored warrior, dominates the freshwater sawgrass marshes with a powerful bite, adapted to crushing turtles and other sturdy prey. Meanwhile, the American crocodile rules the coastal and brackish waters with a stealth matched only by its rarity. This crocodile is a timid fish-eater, shy and elusive, with no recorded human fatalities attributed to it within the United States. Their distinct niches kept the ecosystem relatively stable for decades. However, starting in the mid-2000s, hunters and fishermen in parts of the Everglades began noticing something strange. The large American crocodiles that had claimed prime basking spots for years suddenly vanished. They didn't die off en masse, nor did their food sources collapse. Instead, they appeared displaced, as if a new power had pushed them from their territory. A change was rippling quietly through the swamp, signaling a disruption of the natural order. The presence of such a shift always hints at one of two biological realities: either the collapse of prey populations or the rise of a superior predator. At that time, the scientific community's attention was focused elsewhere, blaming the Burmese pythons for the decline of many native mammals. Sightings of unusual large reptiles, The dark, aggressive lizards, tracking boats and acting unlike any alligator, were dismissed as misidentifications, filtered through what experts expected to see rather than what was truly there. But local reports persisted, challenging the established narrative. Unlike alligators, these animals did not bask lazily or retreat easily. Instead, they exhibited behaviors that suggested intent and intelligence. They trailed boats and held themselves higher in the water, observations incompatible with native species' typical habits. Something new had taken root, hiding in plain sight beneath the focus on pythons and other invasive threats. The uneasy silence around these sightings eventually gave way to biological evidence. Something far more ominous was lurking in the canals, rewriting the rules of the Everglades. The Everglades ecosystem at war. The Everglades' delicate ecosystem long depended on balance maintained by two quite reptiles, the mighty American alligator and the elusive American crocodile. These two species carved out distinct territories and ecological roles that minimized direct competition. Alligators dominate freshwater marshes with heavy armor and a bite force engineered to crush resilient prey, commanding respect as brutes of the swamp. Meanwhile, American crocodiles occupy coastal brackish zones, relying on stealth to catch fish and avoid confrontation, making them less aggressive and far less threatening to humans. This peaceful territorial division ensured both species' survival for millions of years, with evolutionary adaptations fine-tuning their habits. American crocodiles are shy, endangered, and fragile. Their populations clustered tightly around protected spots like the cooling canals of the Turkey Point nuclear power plant. These boundaries worked well, maintaining a kind of ecological calm in the swamp's harsh world. Predator and prey lived in a rough but stable balance. However, this equilibrium started to fracture by the early 2000s. Local fishermen and residents near Silver Bluff Creek reported a disturbing change. The established crocodiles that had basked for decades were vanishing from their traditional haunts without explanation. These were not dead, but displaced, suggesting an invasive presence forcing them out of prime real estate. An apex predator does not abdicate territory lightly. Such a shift signaled a shift in dominance or resources. At first, blame was placed on the Burmese python invasion, which indeed was devastating Florida's mammal populations. These giant constrictors altered the swamp's food web, consuming raccoons, possums, bobcats, and more. With the pythons consuming much of the ground-level prey, a ripple effect on aquatic predator food chains seemed plausible. Scientists and media were laser-focused on combating the python explosion, possibly overlooking other unseen factors. Meanwhile, residents insisted a new predator prowled the waterways. Descriptions of these dark, aggressive reptiles did not fit the known profiles of pythons or native alligators. They did not bask openly or behave passively. Instead, they exhibited stalking and aggressive tracking behaviors uncommon to the swamp's traditional rulers. Despite these reports, biologists largely attributed the sightings to misidentifications or confusion, a failure rooted in cognitive bias, seeing only what fit prevailing assumptions. The bodies discovered along the canals told a different story, further fueling suspicion. Rangers found smaller reptiles slain not by constriction, as a python would, but with a terrifying forensic signature, torn apart with violent spinning movements known as the death roll. The bite radius was too wide for an alligator, and the aggression level too high for an American crocodile. This physical evidence clashed with accepted knowledge and hinted at a predator with unprecedented power and ferocity. By 2009, these suspicions took shape when herpetologists at the University of Florida captured a juvenile crocodile in the Miami Canal system.
A croc in a canal has residents worried, spotted in a South Miami neighborhood. Families concerned that canal is...
Despite its small size, something about this specimen generated an immediate sense of unease, a biological uncanny valley where familiarity is shadowed by something eerily wrong. Under close examination, Its physical traits and behavior challenged known classifications, signaling the arrival of a predator unlike any other encountered in Florida. The unraveling of this crocodile's true identity would upend everything scientists knew about predators in the Everglades and confirm that a new, dangerous contender now ruled these waters. Unraveling the predator's identity. The juvenile captured in 2009 provided crucial scientific insight, but also confusion. On first glance, its sharp V-shaped snout marked it as a crocodile, distinguishing it from the broader, rounded snout of local alligators. Yet something was unmistakably off in its anatomy. Its dorsal armor, composed of bony plates called osteoderms or scutes, displayed strict geometric patterns unlike the irregular, chaotic arrangements seen on the Native American crocodile. This precise alignment was unprecedented and suggested a different evolutionary blueprint. More unnerving was the animal's behavior. While American crocodiles typically thrash briefly when caught before entering a catatonic state to conserve energy, this specimen displayed relentless aggression bordering on frenzy. Rather than hissing, it emitted a deep, low-frequency growl rarely heard in Florida waters, an acoustic warning that set off alarm bells among researchers. Such temperament hinted at genetic differences far beyond a mere mutation or environmental impact. Given these anomalies, biologists explored hybridization as a theory. Could this be a cross between local crocodiles and other reptiles? While hybridization between alligators and crocodiles is impossible due to their evolutionary divergence some 80 million years ago, crossing between different crocodile species is documented. Initial speculation suggested a mix between the American crocodile and a Central American species, potentially creating a hybrid with unpredictable aggression and traits. However, theory remained just speculation until hard data came in. Over 2 years, more specimens were captured and studied, revealing a pattern of rapid growth, approximately 28% faster than native crocodiles. This accelerated development meant these animals reached sexual maturity earlier, grew larger, faster, and dominated the swamp's food chain with a lethal competitive advantage. Ecologically, this growth surge was catastrophic for native species. To confirm the species, tissue samples from these animals were sent for DNA sequencing, focusing on the mitochondrial cytochrome B gene, a genetic marker that not only identifies species, but pinpoints ancestral origins. Scientists expected to find matches in Central American crocodile populations.
Crocodile is under the microscope. Scientists from around the world, Australian experts believe genetic technology might lead
or Caribbean lineages, but the results shocked them. The genetic profiles matched exactly with Nile crocodiles, Crocodilus niloticus, a species native to Africa known for its deadly hunting prowess. This revelation transformed the understanding of Florida's new predator. The American crocodile is a specialist fish eater and, while formidable, exhibits shy, reclusive behavior with no recorded human fatalities. The Nile crocodile, by contrast, is a generalist and opportunistic man-eater, responsible for roughly 200 human deaths annually across its African range. It sees anything entering its domain as potential prey, making Florida's waterways a potentially deadly environment. Digging deeper, researchers pinpointed the genetic signature to a Nile crocodile subpopulation from the KwaZulu-Natal province in South Africa. This connection exposed the vector. It could only have arrived through humans. It is likely that private collectors imported hatchlings or juveniles from this region in the late 1990s, raising them as pets until they became unmanageable monsters that were then released or escaped into the wild. The quarantine of exotic pet trade laws failed to prevent this ecological disaster. Following the genetic breakthroughs, researchers correlated capture dates. The 2009 hatchling, the subadult specimens from 2012 and 2014, all genetically related siblings. This evidence proved a breeding population long established in Florida's canals, with a reproducing adult pair estimated to have arrived around 1998 or 2000. For nearly 15 years, this apex predator eluded detection, thriving despite hurricanes, cold snaps, and the ongoing python invasion. The question haunting biologists now is chilling. The original adult breeders were never found. The adults capable of surviving and reproducing for over a decade remain statistically likely at large in the Everglades. These giants have survived against all odds, and they are still watching, waiting, silently asserting a reign in Florida's swamps, far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. With the predator's identity confirmed, attention turned to the consequences of its presence and what it means for Florida's native species and human safety moving forward. Behavior and growth advantage. One of the most alarming discoveries about these invasive Nile crocodiles was their extraordinary growth rate. Unlike Native American crocodiles, which grow slowly and carefully conserve energy in a competitive environment, these newcomers were growing approximately 28% faster. In the wild, such an advantage is more than a statistic. It is a game changer. Faster growth means reaching sexual maturity sooner, achieving apex size quicker, and ultimately outcompeting native species for food and territory. This rapid development gave them a lethal edge in the swamp's brutal ecosystem. Beyond their speed of growth, their physical dominance was clear during capture attempts. Unlike the normally shy American crocodiles that flee when threatened, these animals displayed unwavering confidence. They stood tall on their legs in a high walk posture, signaling supreme dominance and fearlessness. This posture, combined with a short, broad snout and perfectly aligned, geometric dorsal armor, indicated a creature far removed from the native species in both form and temperament. Their very presence demanded recognition. The temperament of these crocodiles distinguished them even further. While American crocodiles often go catatonic when captured to conserve energy, the Nile specimens exhibited sustained, high-octane aggression bordering on boldness. They emitted low-frequency growls unheard in local waters, a sound that sent clear warnings to those nearby. This intense aggression underscored their potential danger, pointing to a predator biologically primed to dominate and slain without hesitation. In addition to these behavioral traits, their metabolic settings appeared different, enabling them to thrive where others struggled. Reptiles, as ectotherms, rely heavily on environmental factors like temperature and food availability to regulate their growth and activity. The Nile crocodile's ability to grow and operate faster in Florida's climate.
A 2016 study has confirmed the presence of Nile crocodiles surviving in the wild of South Florida.
Was an unexpected advantage, suggesting they possess physiological adaptations that native crocodiles lack. This metabolic edge allows them to outperform competitors and better exploit resources. This biological machine of a predator seemed perfectly suited to Florida's wetlands, thriving where native species were constrained by evolutionary limits. Their larger bite radius and aggressive hunting techniques allowed them to take down a wider variety of prey. Rangers found carcasses marked by death rolls and torn flesh, confirming the crocodile's predatory efficiency. These attacks were too powerful to be from local alligators or crocodiles, highlighting the Nile crocodile's superior slaying capacity. The presence of such a robust and aggressive predator sparked concern among biologists and wildlife managers. The possibility of an ecological takeover was no longer theoretical. With their rapid growth, fierce behavior, and dominance, the Nile crocodiles threatened to upset the delicate balance that the Everglades had maintained for millennia. Native animals, from small reptiles to mammals, faced a new, relentless hunter. It was also clear that human intervention had unknowingly facilitated this invasion. These animals were not natural immigrants, but the result of exotic pet trade failures. Released or escaped from captivity, these powerful predators had founded breeding populations from the late 1990s onward. Their growing numbers meant that without swift action, their impact on Florida's ecosystems and human safety could become catastrophic. Understanding the behavioral and growth advantages of these Nile crocodiles revealed just how ill-prepared the Everglades and its inhabitants were to face this new apex predator. Its presence was a warning. Nature's order was being rewritten beneath the surface, and the consequences could be dire. From these physical and behavioral clues, the investigation deepened into how these formidable creatures arrived and established themselves in Florida's waterways. The invasion's origins. The origins of the Nile crocodile invasion in Florida
Researchers found 3 man-eating Nile crocodiles
trace back to the exotic pet trade, a world where appearance and novelty often overshadow long-term consequences. The precise genetic match to a crocodile subpopulation from South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province was the smoking gun that linked the Everglades predators to human activity. Crocodiles do not swim 7,000 miles across the ocean unaided, and certainly not make a transatlantic journey to South Miami. The introduction was undoubtedly facilitated by collectors importing hatchlings or juveniles, likely with questionable or forged permits. In the late 1990s, private collectors brought in these Nile crocodiles as exotic pets, seeking to raise them from cute hatchlings. However, as the animals grew into 6-foot predators, the realities of housing such dangerous creatures became overwhelming. In typical fashion for reckless owners, the cage doors were opened, intentionally or accidentally, and the crocodiles were released. Free from captivity, the animals adapted quickly to their new environment, taking advantage of Florida's warm climate and abundant waterways. The capture timeline adds weight to this narrative. A hatchling found in 2009, subadult specimens caught in 2012, and again in 2014 were genetically related siblings. This confirms a reproductive breeding pair had established itself well before the hatchling's capture, respecting the roughly 10 to 12 years Nile crocodiles take to reach sexual maturity. This places patient 0 in the swamp around 1998 or 2000. Giving the invasive population almost 15 years of unchecked growth and spread. This timeline highlights a chilling reality. The Nile crocodiles survived major natural challenges. They endured hurricanes that ravaged the region, cold snaps capable of stalling many tropical species, and even the python explosion that decimated other native wildlife. Their resilience and adaptability outpaced many other invasive species, establishing them as a formidable and persistent threat in the Everglades ecosystem. Despite removals of offspring and subpopulations, the original breeding adults remain unaccounted for. Statistically, massive adults capable of surviving 15 years in the dense swamp are likely still at large. These creatures are not just surviving, they are asserting dominance from the shadows, moving through waterways and wetlands with terrifying consistency. Their elusive presence fuels concern among biologists, conservationists, and local residents alike. The introduction of these apex predators through the exotic pet trade reflects a broader problem of wildlife trafficking and inadequate enforcement. Many species escape or are released when owners cannot manage them, but crocodiles of this size and aggression pose an especially acute danger. This invasion underscores the need for tighter regulations and greater public awareness about the risks of exotic animal ownership. Further complicating the invasion is the potential for hybridization between Nile crocodiles and the Native American crocodile. These two species, although distinct, are genetically similar enough to interbreed. In captivity, related crocodile species have produced offspring that are larger, stronger, and more aggressive than either parent. Such hybrids could carry the Nile crocodile's aggression combined with adaptations suited for Florida's climate, creating a super croc that threatens to expand its range even further north. As emerging hybrids potentially push into residential canals and urban areas from Fort Lauderdale to Boca Raton, and possibly beyond to Orlando, Florida, faces an unprecedented ecological and public safety crisis. The natural barriers shaping reptile populations, like temperature limits, may no longer be sufficient to confine these predators. Evolution, fueled by human intervention, is breaching the fences meant to protect both wildlife and people. This origin story reveals how the combination of human carelessness and biological adaptability has created a perfect storm. The Everglades now harbor a predator not native to these lands but fully entrenched, challenging the balance and pushing native species to the brink. With the roots of this invasion laid bare, attention shifts to the profound impact this predator has on the ecosystem and what the future may hold. Ecological consequences. The arrival of the Nile crocodile in the Everglades has triggered a ripple of disruption felt across the entire ecosystem.
The uncertainty of other Nile crocodiles making the Florida Everglades home is causing major concern.
Native species that once thrived under a delicate balance now face a relentless new hunter, far more aggressive and capable than anything previously encountered. As the Nile crocodile outgrows and outcompetes native alligators and American crocodiles, these traditional apex predators have been displaced from their territories. This territorial upheaval alters not only predator relationships, but also the populations of prey animals, creating cascading effects through the food web. With their superior growth rates, faster maturity, and aggressive hunting, Nile crocodiles dramatically shift the dynamics of predator-prey interactions. Smaller reptiles, birds, and mammals risk becoming easy targets, reducing biodiversity and threatening ecosystem health. The aggressive predation also challenges the survival of native crocodiles, particularly the already fragile American species that rely on specialized habitats and limited food sources. Competition for resources intensifies, and the native reptiles struggle to maintain their foothold. In places like Silver Bluff Creek, where large American crocodiles once congregated peacefully, their disappearance coincides with the rise of these new predators. Such displacement indicates not just competition, but direct pressure and possible lethal confrontations. The usual territorial boundaries that structured the swamp's ecology are eroding, and as prime basking spots and hunting grounds fall under Nile crocodile control, native species are forced into smaller, fragmented areas. This fragmentation exacerbates their vulnerability to environmental stress and humans. Human activity also complicates matters. The continual expansion of urban development into Florida's wetlands reduces available habitat, concentrating wildlife into increasingly confined zones. This urban-wildlife interface increases encounters between people and these aggressive crocodiles, elevating potential risks. The ecosystem changes are no longer confined to remote swamplands. They now intersect with residential communities, raising urgent questions about safety and coexistence. Moreover, the Nile crocodile's impact extends beyond direct predation. Their presence may reshape the behaviors of other animals, forcing shifts in feeding patterns, reproductive habits, and migration routes. Such behavioral modifications can destabilize the ecosystem, leading to unpredictable outcomes. Over time, the altered patterns might transform the Florida wetlands into a vastly different environment, less hospitable to native species and rich in invasive ones. Ecologists warn that once such an apex predator establishes itself, reversing the ecological damage is exceptionally difficult. The Everglades' challenging terrain and vast expanse provide ideal cover for these crocodiles to breed and spread without easy detection. Similar to other invasive species outbreaks, containment requires overwhelming effort, and timelines stretch over decades. The longer they persist, the more entrenched their negative effects become. The complexity of this ecological upheaval deepens when we consider the potential for genetic mixing between native and invasive crocodiles, a development that could reshape Florida's natural landscape even further. Hybridization and future threats. A looming concern for biologists is the threat of hybridization between the invasive Nile crocodiles and Native American crocodiles.
Those crocs have been interbreeding with the American saltwater crocs, and we're starting to find 19 and 20-foot long crocs.
Though distinct species, they are genetically close enough to interbreed, a process rarely considered until the Nile crocodile's introduction forced their habitats into closer proximity. Captive breeding programs have shown that related crocodile species can produce hybrids with traits surpassing either parent, greater size, strength, and aggression, raising alarms about what might occur in the wild. The term hybrid vigor, or heterosis, implies that the progeny may take on the Nile crocodile's well-known ferociousness, plus the American crocodile's traits, which are well adapted to Florida's climate. The native crocodiles are colder climate ones, unlike the tropical ones, and more so have their presence limited to the southernmost parts of the state. The hybrids could adopt the Nile's strength across varying temperatures and thus be able to go further up north into the urban and suburban waterways that were, until now, safe from the threat of crocodiles. This mixing of genes has the potential to produce the super crocs that will not only be very strong and powerful predators, but also excellent and adaptable invaders. The area of their presence could include human-populated places like Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, and possibly even Orlando, if they come that far inland. Such an expansion leads to a marked increase in the chances of humans coming into contact with and even conflicting with the crocodiles, thus posing a serious public safety issue, which existing wildlife management practices are unable to deal with. The separation that used to keep the local crocodiles apart from the Nile ones is now giving way to overlapping ranges and changes in the environment. The climate changes that not only raise the temperature but also alter the habitats might help hybrids to survive and expand their range. As the divisions between the ecosystems grow thinner, the risk of a transition from a genetically diverse, albeit slow-changing ecosystem, to one where the effects of novel crossings between species are the determining factors increases. Crocodiles, particularly those in the southeastern United States, have been facing reproductive isolation from the Nile by the colder environment during the winters, although the latter has been creeping up north gradually. However, the barriers that once separated the two species are slowly melting away as their territories begin to overlap, and it gets harder for the environment to drive them apart. The existence of hybrid populations poses a significant challenge for both conservation and eradication operations. The task of taking out pure Nile crocodiles is already an enormous one, and hybrids might be even more difficult to discern and manage. Their diverse traits can mislead visual identification, thereby making population monitoring less precise. Such uncertainty diminishes wildlife agencies' capability to respond in a timely manner and to allocate resources strategically. Moreover, hybridization endangers the genetic purity of the American crocodile, an endangered species that barely survives in Florida. The influence of Nile crocodile genes could ruin the conservation efforts and further absorb the native population. The disappearance of genetic identity not just concerns science, but also the culture and the nature linked to these native reptiles. As hybrid threats mount, the challenge of controlling these invasive crocodiles becomes an increasingly complex battle with no simple solution in sight. Efforts and challenges in control. Since the confirmation of Nile crocodiles living and breeding in the Florida Everglades, wildlife authorities have faced an immense challenge: how to contain and eliminate this dangerous invasion. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission adopted a shoot-on-sight policy aimed at total eradication. This aggressive stance reflects the seriousness of the threat these predators pose to both native species and human safety. Yet, carrying out this policy in practice has proven anything but simple. The Everglades area is regarded as one of the most inaccessible and uninhabitable places on the planet.
The Everglades is one of the largest protected wetlands in the world.
It is home to about 1.5 million acres of flood-edged sawgrass, mangrove tunnels, and long blackwater rivers, providing perfect hiding places for the timid crocodiles. Patrols are impeded by the difficult terrain, and tracking individual crocodiles becomes extremely hard. The size and thickness of the jungle allow these animals to disappear very quickly, thus making it almost impossible to find and remove them all. The measures taken to capture or eliminate these crocodiles have been partly successful, The teams were able to take away some of the known young crocodilians that were caught in 2009, 2012, and 2014, but unfortunately, no evidence has ever been found of the original breeding adults. These adults, being large and highly territorial, are probably still around. Huge ancient ones, moving very softly in the swamp. Their tricky nature brings to light the possibility that total extermination may not be attainable using the present methods and resources. Moreover, the nature of the crocodiles adds to the problem. They would rather stay away from people, do their catching of prey at night, and move quietly using the thick cover of the plants. Crocodiles' skill in being unseen in a place like that has turned population monitoring into a game of luck rather than certainty. On the other hand, their fierce temperament makes it necessary for people working with them to be very careful, thus limiting the opportunities for fieldwork. Furthermore, the risk is dynamic. The hybridization of Nile and American crocodiles may result in more adaptable and aggressive offspring, which could make the population more difficult to control. These hybrids may venture into northern waters and urban canals, thus increasing the potential for human interaction. Eradication efforts will have to be adapted to this changing genetic and geographical landscape, which will entail more advanced surveillance and quick response. Florida's Everglades now face a predator far more dangerous than any python: the Nile crocodile. Born of human folly, yet thriving in the wild, this invader threatens ecosystems and people alike. Understanding its behavior, origins, and impact is the first step in confronting this silent slayer. If you found this exploration eye-opening, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into nature's hidden stories.